giants, or the origin of the San Francisco Bay? The original San Francisco giants, or the origin of the San Francisco Bay? Anthony Hogan.
What is today was once before. Today we live in San Francisco, California, but 300 million years ago, this was the Valley of Joe Paul and the land of the Great Bears. You see, before there was a California or North America, all the 7 continents were fused into one supercontinent called Pangea. And everything in Pangea was huge, was giant, and magical. And there are still remnants of that era of giants and magic today. Not only the giant trees of California, but also this giant tail. The original San Francisco giants, or the origin of the San Francisco Bay. Because what is today was once before. Today we have Homo sapiens, 5, maybe 6 feet tall. But back then, they had Homo superior, 500 to 600 feet tall. The trees were so tall that they would pierce the clouds. The gargantuan bears were so big that they could fall a dinosaur with one foul swipe of their mighty paws. And the fairies were not the little Tinkerbells of today's Peter Pan. They were actually our size. And many people theorize that they are our true ancestors. They even had baseball back then. But because everything was huge, they called it big ball. And the Homo superiors were so massive that they couldn't play in a stadium. They had to use entire valleys. The most beautiful valley in all of Pangea was right here. It went from south to what we call San Jose, north to what we call San Pablo Bay, what the two local clans call Joe Paul Valley. And Joe Paul Valley was surrounded by these beautiful hills, what we call Marin Hills, Berkeley Hills, San Leandro Hills, Mount Tam, San Bruno Ridge. These were actually just the stadium seats for the huge fans of big ball. The 8 great hills of San Francisco, and notice I said 8 and not 7, were actually the luxury box seats of the clans, of the 2 royal houses of the clans. You might have heard of some of them, the Royal House of Telegraph, the Royal House of Sutro, the Royal House of the Jack and Jill twins, Jack and Jill Peake. But there was one you might not have heard of, and that was the Royal House of the Franks. See, Mount Frank was exactly where Golden Gate Bridge is today. It actually made one shoreline from the north to south with the great Western Ocean. And the 2 clans, they were called the Redwoods and the Evergreens. The Redwoods, they were orange, because it was a combination of the yellow of the sun and the red of the barks of the trees. They had red fairies that sprinkled red fairy dust on their backs, making them stronger and harder than steel. Their greatest player was Sequoia. He was a stout man with massive muscles and an even more massive stomach. The Evergreens, they were from the south. They were all black, for the rich, dark soil from which the evergreens grew. They had green fairies that sprinkled green fairy dust on their balls, making them all golden big balls. And their best player was this pitcher by the name of Muir. He was lean, but he had this long black hair and this freakishly perfectly coiffed black beard that matched the blacks of their uniforms. And it was a time of the World Series, and these 2 teams were the best in all of Pangea. It was the 9th and final game. The score was 999 to 999. There had been 999 foul balls, and each one of those golden foul balls slammed into the earth, creating the veins of gold that we Homo sapiens discovered in 1849. It was the bottom of the 9th inning. Muir was on the mound, what we call Treasure Island. He threw the ball. It was the fastest pitch in history. It was like a golden streak of lightning. Nobody could see it except for Sequoia. Sequoia hit the ball. Whack! We had our first earthquake. The ball was so fast that it slammed into Mount Frank, hitting it so hard that it vaporized the entire Frank family into a fog of ghosts. And that is why to this day, the fog returns and haunts us in the bay. Well, the waters from the big gaping hole from the Western Ocean flooded in, turning Joe Paul Valley into a massive bay. And the waters came in so fast that the evergreens and the redwoods and the magical red fairies and the magical green fairies all had to work together to save everyone. Which is why, to this day, we take ferries safely across across the bay. And after all of this happened, the redwoods and the evergreens realized that the only way to have true power is to work together. And they decided to create one great plan. And in honor of the Frank clan, which had disappeared into that fog of ghosts, they called themselves the Franciscans. The newly created bay, the Francisco Bay. And that game that happened so long ago still carries with us today. The effects are still with us today. Because people come from all over Pangea, the world, to come here, to feel the magic of the bay, to find their fortunes in gold, and to build championship teams. In other words, they come here to become true world-class giants. Because what once was, what is today, was once before. Madam Toastmaster.